It's not about chasing the ROI all the time. It's about chasing the ROL, the return on life.
Hello and welcome to episode 221 of the Smart Agents Podcast. As always, my name is Michael Walter and I'll be your host. On today's episode, we are joined by team leader of Vancouver-based Exodus real estate team, Randy Dyck. With over 33 years in the real estate industry as a top 1% agent in Canada since 1992, Randy shares how he built his business from studying fellow top producers to hiring an ambitious team. But even with all the success he and his team were having, Randy needed to make a change. And that's when he shifted his mindset from one of a return on investment to that of a return on life. And that shift has allowed Randy to create a more enjoyable career and business. And throughout our conversation, he shares how. But before we get on with today's featured interview, if you or someone else on your team has an incredible story of real estate success or tips to share with our community, send us a message to feedback@smartagents.com. We're always on the lookout for new guests to inspire our listeners. And lastly, if you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents Podcast. We stream on all major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. All right, let's get on with our conversation with Randy Dyck. If you're interested in hearing more from Randy, I highly recommend his podcast, the Return on Life Podcast. I've got a link in the episode description. Well, really the way I like to start everything out is if you could just introduce yourself to us a little bit. Tell us who you are and where you are located.
Well, thanks for having me, Michael. My name is Randy Dyck, and I'm in the Vancouver, Canada market, primarily working in the Fraser Valley, which is just outside of Vancouver. And I've been licensed, this is crazy, for 33 years. So I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of changes over the years. Been a solo agent, a broker owner at one point, then moved that office to another office and joined Remax. And I was there just shy of 20 years. And there is where I really started to build what I call a team approach. And so I spent now 25 years as a team lead, building teams and understanding what that looks like, which is really a brokerage within a brokerage, a mini brokerage. And so I've been very, very blessed, and I've learned a lot of things along the way, made a ton of mistakes, but had some pretty good mountaintop experiences as well, and been blessed through the team and I selling some 7,000 plus homes and properties over the course of those 30 years.
Wow, that's amazing. What was it, when you first were looking to get into real estate, going back, those 33 years, what was it that, sparked your interest in real estate?
Great question. Well, I was working in retail and I was managing a sports shop, and I really, really loved it. It was like Christmas every day. A new box of gear would come in and I'd open it up and take something home with me, but I never had any money. I was starving, had a child, a wife, a car payment, a house payment, expecting a second. And I came from a farming background. And so I watched the labor of my parents and what that could mean for us as a family. And so just building something beyond just another, whatever it was, another paycheck, another whatever. So I was really excited about building something beyond just being a manager of a store, even though I loved it, but I needed to really take my entrepreneurial mindset and then let it flourish.
Right. When you entered real estate in those early years, what were you doing to build your business, get your name out there, and start generating, obviously, the business that you did start to build?
Yeah, great question. In 30 years, a lot has changed in real estate. Like there's been three major changes. One being the internet came in the mid 90s. And the second one, of course, is social media, and that's still growing. And the third one is AI. But for me, back in 1992, it was just how many places can I be in front of people, and how could I be in front of as many people in a day, a week, whatever that was. So floor duty was a really big piece. We had a great location for floor duty. I did a lot of open houses. And of course, I built a lot of relationships at that sports shop with people that were fairly prominent in my community. They had decent net worth because they were coming in and buying a lot of sports equipment from me. So I certainly worked that sphere that I built over the last 6 years as a employee manager of that sports shop as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you brought up there is, when you get into real estate, in most cases, in most of the people I've talked to throughout the years of doing this podcast, it's not one of those professions that people get into right out of high school or right out of school. They maybe are making a career change. So they do have a bit of a sphere of influence or people that they, interact with on a regular basis, already kind of built up around them a bit.
Yes. But, it's interesting. I was 28 years old when I moved into real estate. And some of my best customers I thought would be a shoe-in for me to help them. And I had a bit of a rude awakening there as well, because they said, well, Randy, we trust you with our feet. We trust you with, putting us in the perfect set of skis or whatever, but this is our house. And then so many of them already had agents that they've been working with. So that was a bit of like an aha moment, like, oh my goodness. So, there was some business from that, but I really had to develop my whole new database and sphere of influence as well. And, along the way, I got a fair bit of business actually from other real estate agents because they saw me as this young, hungry agent. And a lot of them were kind of like, well, I don't know if this guy's actually going to do anything. So why don't you take it on and pay me a referral? And so I just really worked my office environment as well. They became my sphere of influence as well. So that was another really important piece.
Yeah, I think, showing that ambition to go out there and do whatever it takes and to take on those clients that maybe, they don't necessarily have the time for or, desire for, I think is a great way to build up your customer base there.
Yes, absolutely.
As you began to grow, how did that all, how did that transition go from, getting started to, all right, everything's chugging along and we are really moving here? How did that, what was that phase like?
Yeah. Well, the office I was in was a boutique office. We had, 28, 32, 34 agents. So it wasn't a large office, but, I was very, very fortunate, to really catch fire early and get some traction. And by the end of the second year, I was the top agent in the office. And so I got a lot of traction and a lot of opportunity that way. So that boasted very, very well for me in creating what I then became, the number one agent in that office, which helped me, produce more sales. The challenge with that, though, was that I felt like I was a big fish, but I didn't realize I was in a small pond. And so when we moved our brokerage over to the Remax brokerage, I started bumping in agents that were selling 400, 500, 600 homes a year. And I went, oh my goodness, my 50 or 60 homes is really, not that great. But if they can do it, why can't I? And so then it just became, how do I study these guys? How do I research what they're doing and basically duplicating, or, we call that the R&D, rip off and duplicate. And that really then propelled me. So I was kind of stuck at, an income level of about, 160, 170 back in the 90s. That was a fair bit of money. Then I kind of got stuck at that 250, 260 range. And then once I started duplicating what the big producers are doing, well, that's when it took off. And then it was, $500,000, $1 million. Oh, well, if I can do $1 million, why can't I do 2 million? If I can do 2 million, why can't I do 4 million? It was just a matter of putting the systems in place, hiring the right people. And that's probably one of the biggest things I think many agents don't do is they don't find the who. They try and figure out the how. But you can find a who that knows the how. And that is really when it took off for me, when I was doing some really good hires, which I was afraid to do initially.
Right.
I really was stuck on doing it all myself. I had a lot of pride in doing it all myself. And it wasn't until I opened up the opportunity to have others involved with me that it really then took off. So there's a great book. Benjamin Hardy writes it's who, not how, And I'd really highly recommend reading that book because it really is about the who, not the how.
Yeah, and when you were really studying those top performers, when you changed brokerage and you saw those people that were doing the 400 to 500 sales, is that something that you really looked at, is to see who they were surrounding themselves with, what kind of systems, and maybe what they were doing to offload some of that extra work?
Yeah, really, yeah. Looked at what they were doing. I spent more time looking at how they're generating the leads in the business and less about what they were doing in the back end. And I should have actually spent some time really looking on the systems in the back end a bit more, because I was basically building this airplane as we were trying to fly it. We're adding another, 100 sales or 200 sales. Is how do we, take care of this? So again, really great admin people that, I would just throw it on their desks and say, figure it out, because I got another 5 or 6 appointments I got to get to today. And so it just, it was really about, having some good hires that really were motivated like I was, on a different level on the admin side. And I could just go out and I always called myself a hunter. I'm just going to go out and hunt and drag something back to the office, another listing, another this, another that, throw it on a desk and go hunt some more. And so that was the approach that I took. And I was very fortunate hiring some great agents around me that could pick up the slack as well. And, I was a bit spoiled early on. I hired just some fantastic young buyer's agents that turned into what I call hybrids, where they were doing both sales and like listings and buyers. And it just seemed too easy at times. In hindsight, I look back and I go, wow, I was so fortunate. Those first 3, 4, 5 hires were just so magical. And I just assumed that they just were easy to find. But, it proved to be a bigger and bigger challenge as my career, as my business grew and went on, to find those good hires.
Yeah. When looking back on those people and then, moving forward to seeing the challenges that it was, to maybe duplicate that over and over again, was there a specific, skill set or trait or something in those people that you think, made them such great hires? Or was it just simply that they were just ambitious?
Well, they're very, very ambitious. They're very, very competitive. And they were young and wanted to prove to others that they were capable, that they were, worthy of earning, money, working hard at making commissions. And so, yeah, the first 3, 4, 5 hires, had a bit of a chip on their shoulder, were competitive. They were young men at the time. So we were a boy band, so to speak. And we had just great chemistry and camaraderie. It was so strong that we would just, we couldn't wait to be at the office at 7 a.m. to work together. We couldn't wait to hang out on a Friday or Saturday night watching the big game. That was the synergy that we had. And of course, it can't always be like that, but there was that season that it was just really, really special.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, if you truly enjoy, the people that you were surrounded with, to be able to hang out and watch, the game outside of, the working hours, I think that just kind of shows how cohesive the team is. And, people willing to, maybe pick up the slack for somebody when something goes on.
Yeah. The interesting thing too was I was in a real phase of learning, of growing. And so collectively, we were all on the same growth bus. I think sometimes we can be, as leaders, we can be, while we're behind the glass, we're riding our own sports car, and you guys, jump on that other bus. So I think that also really was an important ingredient, that we're all on the same growth bus.
Yeah. Yeah. When you work with, teams now and, help, people grow their own businesses, what what kind of advice or tips do you give to make sure that there isn't that glass wall between yourself and the people you're bringing on?
Yeah, there's a great analogy where, you can be a commander and be, outside of the warfare, so to speak, and giving directions from afar. But I think in order to really do it well, you need to be in the middle of the fight. Not necessarily in the front line, but definitely not in the back line either. You need to be somewhere in the middle where you can feel it, understand it, where your team knows that you hear them, see them, and understand them. And then at that point, they're going to say, well, I now know you hear me. I trust you, and let's do this together. I think that's a really important piece. And the other one that I really work on too in the leadership side of things is what I call L3. And that's really about creating legacy for others. We want to create legacy for ourselves, but if we can be a legacy leader, and what I mean by legacy is the leg or the outcome of what we want for others. But what do we need to do in order for that to happen? Well, we need to have legacy plus leverage equals true leadership. So if we're creating legacy in our agents or anybody that we surround ourselves with, and they can leverage, and I mean leverage everything out of ourselves as leaders, then we truly can say that we're leaders, and only then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as a real estate agent, you're there, you're providing somebody, you're helping them achieve their dream, whether, that's purchasing this dream home that they've always, had their sights on, or maybe, it's their first home and you're really helping them create that generational wealth. And then I think as a brokerage leader, a team leader, it's that same thing. It's just a different, maybe different client base, but you are there to help those agents create, that dream for themselves and bring on that generational wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. As you grew, one of the topics I want to get into is what you call the return on life. Where did that come from? And I have to imagine something sparked it. There had to have been something that, made you realize that maybe I'm moving a little too fast, or maybe there's just too much going on.
Yeah. Everything in my being. So I'm very competitive.
Yeah.
I'm a twin, which makes me competitive out of the gate.
Right.
Secondly, I broke my neck at 14, had to learn to kind of walk and do everything all over again. So I had to really, really fight from within. So that made me even more competitive. Yeah. And then I just have this real competitive spirit. So I just wanted to be, the best I could be. How can Randy be the best in this, with this mindset, this body, this whatever? And so in real estate it was, how can I be the very, very best? How can I be number one? And that got me into some trouble now and again, because sometimes you can be too much of a driver. And so it was back in 2017, 2018, again, I'm just pushing and pushing and pushing. And a couple of things happened within my real estate business. If anybody's a team lead that's listening to this, you probably have experienced this as well. You bring on a couple of new agents, and you always should hire at least 2 to 4 agents at a time, because if you're going to train one, you might as well train 3 or 4 at a time. And so I trained a couple of other good young agents and got them up to a sizable number of deals they were doing. A couple of them were in that 50, 60 deal range. So, just like, okay, really got them working. And then if you're a team lead, you probably have had this experience in this conversation. Hey, Rand, you got 20 minutes and I already know where it's going. Thanks for everything. You've done so much for me, but it's time for me to move on and do my own thing. And it was just like, again and again and again. As a team lead, you train, they glean, and then they leave. You train, they glean all this good information to become really zero to heroes, and then they leave. And so it was in that moment I was thinking, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so through that, and just having some discussions with my wife. We'd been married at that time for about 32 years. And she was like looking at me, Randy, like this game of real estate, it's like killing us. It's killing us. You're pounding, massive hours in. We never really seem to be disengaged from this thing called real estate. And so we got to find a better way to do this. And so I started thinking about this, but what about the ROI? What about the ROI? And then she says, it's not always about the ROI, Randy. We have enough money, but I want to be at the top. It's not always about being at the top. What if we just had a life that we're really, really satisfied with? And that's where it kind of triggered for me. It's not about chasing the ROI all the time. It's about chasing the ROL, the return on life. And what that did for me is it made me recognize that even though I'm cut from this piece of cloth that wants to push, 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 not everybody is. And I started recognizing that maybe I don't need to hire Randys.
Right.
Maybe I could hire somebody that says, just earning 80,000 is enough for me to get my return on life. It's not about the return on investment. So that's where it kind of started, manifesting and morphing into something. And so I just started working at that. And the more I've gotten into it, the more I realized that it is really about contentment and about return on life.
Yeah. When you started to do that, and what was it? How did your process for finding new agents and bringing people on that maybe weren't like you said, the Randys, and that were go 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 all the time? How was that transition for you?
Yeah, it was a little bit challenging because I had to readjust my whole way of thinking and settle into a different almost mindset that this is okay after being so highly competitive and highly charged and wanting to chase, very specific numbers, per month, per week, per year, all of that. So I had to kind of put some of that stuff away. And part of my transition was also moving away from my current brokerage to another brokerage that just seemed to align more with that mindset and more of that understanding and more of that collaborative approach. And so I made a move in 2018 that also facilitated a lot of that. And in fact, I was working through that 2017, 2018, even 2019, and I really didn't coin and own that phrase of the ROL till about 2019, 2020. And that was after my transition from my current brokerage to my new brokerage. It really started to resonate deep within my DNA, what I call my prima powers, not my superpowers, my prima powers, my primal powers. And so it was really there. And it just allowed me to have a more diverse team, a team that actually enjoyed life more. We had more fun within the office. It was really a transformational moment. It really was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to imagine that also, permeates out to, clients and people you're working with, having a more enjoyable experience as well. If everybody's, enjoying, their time and is not, just exhausted from pounding the pavement all day long, I have to imagine that helps them create longer lasting clients as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What, if for you, how did you, is this return on life? Is that something that you started, coaching your agents and people that were on your team as well as help facilitate that same kind of mindset within your team?
Yeah. Well, I started a podcast all about it. So Return on Life podcast is something that I dive deep into, and that did permeate through our office. We started doing things a little bit differently in how we organized even our daily, weekly schedule in our offices. Because it was always like, let's be here at 8 a.m. and, it's, the gun goes off at 8, like we got to go, to being a bit more relaxed about that. And it opened it up to having different agents in our office, from, mothers that were working part-time to agents that had a different routine or had children that they wanted to drop off at school. So it was just, I think, a lot more holistic approach to it. And the vibe within the office was just a little bit more about, hey, life. And we spent more time actually doing things together as a team as well, whether it be, hiking, going out for lunches and having evenings together. Like it just changed the whole makeup and mindset of our office.
Yeah. I have to imagine that, that kind of mentality also, because I mean, this is also coincide right around, the pandemic as well. And things really kind of changing, for how people could interact, or, if there was mothers that had school children, maybe they had to homeschool for a while. I know like we did. My son actually sat right behind me and did his kindergarten schoolwork for that whole second half of 2020. And just having that flexibility to be able to, continue on with my career and provide for my family, but also at the same time, make sure that he was taken care of. I think, I think it's really interesting that all coincided at the same time.
An interesting story that came out of that as well is because, it was divisive, right? There
Right.
was people on both sides of the equation of the fence. And even within my office, there was a couple of moments where it was kind of tense, like how are we responding, how are we acting? What's my view on this? Should we be getting, the vaccine? Like, should we not? Like, it was really, quite heated at times. And because of our approach, I can remember this one meeting saying, listen, guys, this is a safe place. This is a safe place for all of us. Like, let's talk openly about it and let's respect each other's opinions. And I don't think that would have come out if it wasn't that where we were with the return of life, with the diversity within our office now. I don't think that would have come out the same way. I don't think it would have ended that well. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with the Return of Life podcast, and the other things you're doing, how has that just changed? I have to imagine, even 20 years ago, Randy looked at himself now. I mean, what would that Randy say these days?
Wow, if I could go back, I would have told Randy a few things about chilling out a little bit, adding more diversity to the office, being more balanced in my life. What has happened, transformed in the last 5-6 years is unbelievable, Michael. Like we've moved from a neighborhood or a city that we've lived in for 35 plus years. And one day we just said, why are we living here? Like, this is about return on life. We want to be by the ocean. We love the ocean. So we moved to a small little beach town close to the ocean. Of course, I still do all my real estate, but things changed because of the pandemic. We don't seem to need to meet as many or as in person as much. So all of that's changed. So if I could go back in time, I would have probably, asked a few more questions about why are we doing it this way? Why could we not adjust, change, make it more fun, make it more about the return on life? And I think we would have maybe been in a little better spot, but here we are today.
Yeah,
today.
absolutely. Well, I think and with the advances in technology and just even the way things shook out with the pandemic, I think people have become, accustomed to the virtual meetings and, maybe not meeting face to face and having all these, walkthroughs all the time for real estate. I think, things have changed so much over the last handful of years that I think it allows for, people to run their businesses, like you are, and still, and really be able to enjoy their life around the real estate aspect.
Yeah, absolutely true. The pandemic actually brought a lot of great changes. In fact, I'll I'll do market evaluations without actually going to the home. I've listed properties without ever seeing them because the pandemic now has allowed the openness of the seller to see it differently and understand that we could do it a different way. It doesn't have to be the old traditional way of doing it. So there's lots of great benefits to what came out of the pandemic, no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of time, if you would have told somebody, 7 years ago that we're going to do all this stuff virtual, they would have thought, oh, well, how are you ever going to create personal relationships with people? And I almost argue, our company is completely virtual now. And I would argue that we have a closer knit, personal relationships with each other than when we were all, clocking in on top of each other, and going our separate ways at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know you're in Florida. And so a few weeks ago, I was in Florida and I was looking for an office space to work in. So I was going to go to the Regis, and the Regis was just too far away. So I found another executive office to go into. And I went to it and the door was locked and like nobody was answering the door. So I looked around me and I saw another real estate office. I won't say which franchise it was, but it was a big office. And I walked across the parking lot and I walked into it and I said, listen, I've got a weird request. I'm doing a podcast. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And I was just wondering if I could use an office for a half a day. I'm a licensed real estate agent from Vancouver, Canada, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, they gave me an office space to work in. I spent the entire day there, not just a half a day. I didn't see one agent. This office had 100+ agents. I didn't see one agent the entire day. Finally, I saw one fellow and I thought, oh, great. I'm going to ask him how the market is. He goes, oh, I'm not an agent. I'm the coffee guy. Like, it has changed. Come on, wake up, everybody.
Yeah.
This idea of going to the office it's out. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you said, it's allowing for a different and a diverse group of people to get into the industry and thrive where maybe they wouldn't have been able to before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Tell me again, where can people find your podcast and anything else that you have going on?
Great. Hey, a couple of things I'm working on. One is I'm working on a new book called The Underdog DNA. Every one of us is an underdog, whether we know it or not. But so I'm working on the underdog DNA, which is an incredible power that we all have when it comes to entrepreneurial, especially in real estate as well. So I'm working on that. I'm going to be releasing that early next year. Of course, I do a coaching program too called Scientific Scaling Systems, the science behind lead gen, scaling that through systems. So another really cool thing I'm working on and I coach. And then, of course, the Return on Life podcast, which you'll find on all the platforms, Return on Life podcast. And then if you're curious about my team, I run the Eximus Real Estate Team, EXIMUS. And I'm on all the social platforms too. So really appreciate you having me on, Michael.
I really want to thank Randy for joining us today and sharing how this mindset shift transformed not only his career, but his life. Remember, if you're interested in hearing more from Randy, be sure to check out the Return on Life podcast. I've included a link in the episode description. So once again, if you think you or someone else on your team has an incredible story of real estate success or tips to share with our community, send us a message to feedback@smartagents.com. Well, that wraps things up for this episode, but remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and we'll see you on the next episode.